Hey guys, tonight we're slipping back into a world where living rooms doubled as stores, neighbours became customers, and enterprising housewives turned their homes into bustling little businesses without ever leaving the front porch. We're talking about 1950s America, specifically how housewives transformed their living rooms into stores, selling everything from Tupperware to cosmetics to the latest kitchen gadgets, all while wearing pearls and sensible heels. Before we drift in, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if this strange little corner of history genuinely speaks to you. And a huge thank you to the viewer who suggested this topic. Your ideas shape this channel in ways I can't even begin to express, and I'm genuinely grateful you're here. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is. I know someone out there is wide awake at 2:17 a.m, nestled under blankets, pretending this counts as productivity. Speaking of which, we're now live on Spotify, so if you'd rather drift off there, the link is waiting in the description. No pressure, just options. Now dim the lights, switch on a fan for that soft white noise comfort, settle deep into your pillows and get comfortable. Really comfortable, like you're not moving until sunrise unless there's an actual emergency. Because tonight we're exploring a world where women built businesses from their sofas, turned coffee tables into cash registers, and made extra income without a bank loan or a storefront. A world where the doorbell ringing meant a neighbour dropping by to buy dish soap, where living room demonstrations replaced department stores, and where entrepreneurship looked a lot like hospitality. Have you ever wondered what it really felt like to host a Tupperware party in 1956? What did those plastic bowls smell like fresh out of the box? How did housewives convince their friends to buy vacuum cleaners in their parlours? What was it like transforming your home into a retail space every Wednesday afternoon? Did these women feel like pioneers, or were they just trying to make ends meet? And could you survive a single day as a 1950s home-based businesswoman, balancing sales quotas, dinner prep, and the pressure to look perfectly put together while your living room doubled as inventory storage? Well, congratulations. You've just woken up in 1954. Your living room is lined with product samples. Your calendar is packed with party bookings. The coffee's already percolating and your first customer is arriving in an hour. Good luck. You wake early, not because you want to, but because there is inventory to organise, order forms to review, and a living room to transform from family space into showroom before the morning light fully settles through the curtains. The house is quiet now. Your husband already dressed and heading out the door with his briefcase. Your children still asleep upstairs. This is your window, the hour when the home belongs entirely to you and the business you are quietly building within its walls. You slip into your housecoat, tie it neatly, and head toward the kitchen where coffee waits, and your day begins not with leisure, but with logistics. The percolator gurgles softly on the stove, filling the kitchen with that rich, bitter aroma that smells like possibility. You pour yourself a cup, black, no time for cream or sugar, and carry it to the dining room table where your business materials are spread out like a second breakfast setting. Order forms sit in neat stacks. Product catalogues lay open to pages you have memorised. A small metal cash box holds yesterday's earnings, bills folded carefully, coins counted twice. You sip your coffee and review today's schedule. Mrs. Henderson from down the street is coming at 10. She mentioned needing new storage containers, something about her refrigerator being a disaster. You make a mental note to show her the rectangular sets first, the ones with the tight sealing lids that stack so beautifully. At 2, you have a full party booked. 6 women, all from church, all curious about the new colour line. You'll need to set up the full display for that one, arrange everything just so. Make it look abundant without looking cluttered. Your coffee is still hot when you hear the first stirrings upstairs, small feet padding across the floor, your daughter, awake too early, calling for you in that soft, sleepy voice. You set down your cup and climb the stairs, because motherhood does not pause for business, and business does not excuse you from motherhood. You're learning day by day how to be both at once. By the time you return to the kitchen, the sun has started to climb. Light spills through the window above the sink, warm and golden, touching everything with that particular glow that makes even ordinary mornings feel significant. You butter toast for your children, pour milk into small glasses, and listen to their chatter about school, about friends, about things that matter intensely in their world. You nod, you smile, you remind them to finish their breakfast. But part of your mind is already in the living room, rearranging furniture, setting up displays, preparing for the women who will arrive, expecting not just products, but an experience. You glance at the clock, 8:15. You have less than 2 hours to get the children dressed, the house presentable, and yourself transformed from mother to businesswoman. You finish your coffee standing at the counter, looking out at the quiet street. Other houses are waking now too. Curtains pulled back, cars backing out of driveways. Somewhere other women are starting their own days, their own routines. Some of them will walk through your door later, and you will greet them as friends. But you will also greet them as customers, because in this new world you are building, those two things are learning to exist side by side. You rinse your cup, set it in the sink, and take a deep breath. The morning has only just begun. Your living room, just hours ago a place where your family gathered around the television, now transforms into something entirely different. You move the coffee table slightly to the left, creating space for product displays. You arrange Tupperware bowls in neat, colourful stacks on the sideboard. You lay out brochures like place settings at a dinner party. The vacuum cleaner, your latest sample, sits proudly in the corner, gleaming under the lamp. Every item has its place. Every surface tells a story of convenience, modernity, and possibility. You step back, surveying the room with the eye of both homemaker and merchant, knowing that in just a short while, your neighbours will walk through that door not as guests, but as customers. The transformation takes longer than you expected. The sofa needs to be angled differently so women can sit comfortably, while still seeing the demonstration table. You grab one end, push, adjust, push again until it sits just right. Your back protests slightly, but you ignore it. The coffee table, scratched from years of children's projects and forgotten coasters, gets covered with a clean tablecloth, pale yellow, cheerful, the colour of optimism. Now comes the product arrangement, the part that feels almost like art. You start with the Tupperware, building little pyramids of colour. The pastel bowls, soft pinks and mint greens and buttery yellows, stacked together with their lids nested beside them. You arrange them by size, smallest to largest, so the display draws the eye upward. Each bowl is spotless, polished until it shines, because presentation matters. A smudge or a fingerprint could mean the difference between a sale and a polite no thank you. The sideboard holds the specialty items, the cake carrier with its elegant dome, the pitcher set that promises to keep drinks cold for hours, the salad bowl large enough to feed a dinner party. You place small handwritten cards beside each one, noting the price and the features. You learned early that women like to browse quietly, to pick things up and examine them without feeling pressured. The cards give them permission to look without asking. On the dining room table you spread out the catalogues. They're glossy, new, smelling faintly of ink and paper. You open several to key pages, the ones showing complete kitchen sets, the ones with photographs of smiling women holding products you have memorized by heart. You place order forms nearby, pens lined up neatly, ready for the moment when interest turns into commitment. The vacuum cleaner is your showpiece today, your newest sample, sent by the company to demonstrate at parties. It is a sleek model, modern, powerful, promising to make housework easier. You position it near the fireplace where everyone will see it immediately upon entering. You have already practiced your demonstration 3 times this week, vacuuming the same stretch of carpet over and over until you can narrate its features without thinking. You walk through the room slowly, looking at it from every angle. Does it feel welcoming? Does it feel abundant but not overwhelming? You adjust a stack of bowls, straighten a catalogue, move the vacuum cleaner 2 inches to the right. There. Better. The room no longer looks like your living room. It looks like a carefully curated shop, intimate and inviting, a place where women can gather and dream about easier mornings, fresher leftovers, cleaner floors. You have created a space that promises transformation, and you have done it without leaving your home. You glance at the clock. 30 minutes until Mrs. Henderson arrives. Just enough time to change out of your housecoat, fix your hair, apply lipstick, and become the confident businesswoman your neighbours expect to see. Tupperware, Avon, Stanley Home Products, Fuller Brush. These names meant more than merchandise. They meant opportunity. Companies realised that women, confined largely to domestic spaces by societal expectation, possessed untapped sales potential. So they brought the store to the living room, offering housewives a chance to earn income without leaving home. The products themselves were practical, modern, designed to solve everyday problems. Tupperware sealed in freshness. Avon brought beauty to your doorstep. Fuller brushes promised to scrub away every speck of dirt. And women, eager for both financial independence and social connection, became the sales force that turned these brands into household legends. Each company understood something essential. Women wanted more than products. They wanted belonging. They wanted purpose. They wanted to feel like they were part of something larger than the endless cycle of cooking, cleaning, and childcare. So these companies built systems that offered not just merchandise, but meaning. You were not simply selling plastic containers. You were helping your neighbours organise their kitchens, preserve their food, save money. You were solving problems. You were making life better. Tupperware was genius in its simplicity. The bowls and containers came in cheerful colours, far removed from the utilitarian glass jars and metal tins most women used. They sealed with a satisfying burp that became iconic, a little sound that meant freshness locked in, waste prevented. The founder, Brownie Wise, understood that women would not just buy Tupperware. They would gather to see it demonstrated, to touch it, to understand how it could transform their daily routines. The party model was not just about sales, it was about education and entertainment wrapped together. Avon took a different approach. Beauty was personal, intimate. The Avon lady did not sell from a showroom. She came to your door carrying a small case filled with samples, catalogues, and the promise that you, yes you, could feel beautiful even in the middle of an ordinary week. She knew your name, remembered your favourite lipstick shade, asked about your children. She made beauty accessible, affordable, and most importantly, she made it about you. Every purchase felt less like commerce and more like self-care. Stanley Home Products focused on the practical magic of cleanliness. Their mops, brushes, and cleaning solutions were not glamorous, but they were effective. The Stanley party was less about aspiration and more about demonstration. You watched the hostess tackle impossible stains, scrub floors to a brilliant shine, proved that these tools could make housework faster and easier. The products were built to last, engineered with care, and the sales pitch was simple. Invest in quality now, save money and effort later. Fuller Brush carried a legacy. For decades, The fuller brush man had been a fixture of American neighborhoods, walking door to door with his heavy case, offering brushes for every conceivable purpose. By the 1950s, women were entering the field too, carrying that same case, that same reputation for quality. Fuller brushes were not cheap, but they were worth it. They lasted years, sometimes decades. You bought a Fuller brush and passed it down to your daughter. It was not just a purchase, it was an investment in your home. These companies did not just create products, they created movements. They turned ordinary women into entrepreneurs, living rooms into marketplaces, and neighborhoods into networks of commerce and community. They proved that business did not require a storefront or a college degree. It required belief in your product, connection with your customers, and the willingness to turn your home into something more. And women across America answered that call. The Tupperware party was not just a sales event, it was theatre. You invited your friends, your neighbours, the women from church. You served coffee and cookies. You demonstrated how each plastic container sealed with a satisfying burp of freshness. You made it fun, playful, aspirational. Women gathered around your coffee table, laughing, chatting, passing bowls hand to hand, marvelling at how these simple containers could keep leftovers fresh for days. The party created a space where commerce and community blended seamlessly. You were not just selling Tupperware, you were hosting connection, and the sales came naturally because trust was already built into the room. The preparation for a Tupperware party began days in advance. You called your friends, your voice bright and casual, inviting them over for coffee and something fun. You didn't mention sales directly, not yet. You framed it as a gathering, a chance to see something new, a reason to get together on a weekday afternoon when the children were at school and the house felt too quiet. The day of the party you baked. Cookies usually, something simple but homemade. The smell of butter and sugar filled the house, creating an atmosphere of warmth and welcome before anyone even arrived. You brewed coffee in your good percolator, the one you save for company. You set out your nice cups, the ones with delicate handles and matching saucers. Presentation mattered. This was not just a sales pitch, this was hospitality. When the women arrived, you greeted them at the door with genuine warmth. These were your friends, your neighbours, women you saw at the grocery store and the school pickup line. You hugged them, took their coats, led them into the living room where the Tupperware display waited like a colourful surprise. Their eyes widened. They reached out to touch the bowls, lifting lids, pressing them back down to hear that satisfying burp of the seal engaging. You let them explore for a few minutes, chatting casually, pouring coffee, passing cookies. You did not rush. The party had a rhythm, and you had learned to trust it. Let them get comfortable. Let them relax. Let the Tupperware become familiar before you began the demonstration. When everyone was settled, coffee in hand, you began. You picked up a bowl, held it up so everyone could see, and explained its features with the enthusiasm of someone who genuinely believed in what she was selling. You talked about how it kept food fresh, how it stacked neatly in the refrigerator, how it saved money by reducing waste. You filled one with water, sealed it, turned it upside down, not a drop leaked. The women leaned forward, impressed. Then came the fun part. You passed the bowls around, encouraging everyone to try sealing them, to feel the quality of the plastic, to imagine these containers in their own kitchens. You asked questions. What do you usually store leftovers in? Do you ever forget what is in your refrigerator? Have you ever had food spoil because it was not sealed properly? You made them think about their own frustrations, their own needs. You showed them the full range, tiny containers for baby food, medium ones for sandwiches, large ones for salads and casseroles, specialty items like the cake carrier and the pie keeper. You demonstrated how they nested together, taking up minimal storage space. You painted pictures of organized refrigerators, of dinners prepared ahead, of picnics and potlucks made easier. The women talked among themselves, pointing at items, asking questions, imagining possibilities. You watched their faces, reading interest, gauging who was ready to buy and who needed more convincing. You never pushed. You suggested. You answered questions. You let the products speak for themselves. By the end of the party, order forms were being filled out. Women clustered around the dining room table, flipping through catalogues, circling items, calculating totals. You helped them, offering suggestions, pointing out sets that offered better value. The room buzzed with excitement, with the shared thrill of discovery and purchase. As they left, carrying their order forms and the promise of delivery in 2 weeks, they thanked you. Not just for the Tupperware, but for the gathering, for the coffee, for the afternoon. You'd given them more than a sales pitch. You'd given them community. The Avon lady became a fixture of 1950s neighbourhoods, walking from house to house with her sample case, offering lipsticks, perfumes and creams that promised transformation. She was not just a salesperson. She was a friend, a confidant, someone who understood the desire to feel beautiful even on a Tuesday afternoon. When she knocked on your door, you invited her in. You sat together at the kitchen table, and she showed you colours, scents, textures. She knew your name, your preferences, your budget. And when you bought from her, you were not just purchasing cosmetics. You were participating in a ritual of self-care and feminine solidarity that department stores could never replicate. She arrived in the late morning, usually after the breakfast dishes were done, but before lunch preparations began. You heard the knock, soft but confident, and you already knew who it was. You opened the door and there she stood, smartly dressed, lipstick perfect, carrying that distinctive case that seemed to hold magic inside. You invited her in without hesitation. This was a welcome interruption, a break from the routine of laundry and meal planning. She set her case on your kitchen table, opened it with a practiced motion, and suddenly your ordinary kitchen was transformed into a small, intimate beauty counter. The case was organised with meticulous care. Lipstick stood in neat rows, arranged by colour family. Small bottles of perfume nestled in velvet-lined compartments. Compacts of face powder, tubes of hand cream, tiny sample jars of night cream, all of it beautifully packaged, each item feeling special, chosen. She did not rush. She asked about your week, your family, your upcoming plans. She remembered details from previous visits, your daughter's recital, your husband's new job, the recipe you mentioned trying. This was not just business. This was relationship. She cared about you, or at least she made you feel like she did, and in 1950s suburbia, that feeling was priceless. Then she would turn her attention to beauty. She pulled out a new lipstick shade, something that just came in, something she thought would look lovely on you. She opened it, twisted the tube, let you see the colour. Would you like to try it? She handed you a small mirror, watched as you applied the lipstick carefully, considered your reflection. It looked nice. Better than nice. It made you look more awake, more polished, more like the version of yourself you wanted to be. She smiled, nodding. I knew that would suit you. And you believed her, because she had never steered you wrong before. She showed you other things too. A new perfume, light and floral, perfect for spring. She spritzed a tiny amount on a card, let you smell it, watched your reaction. She talked about hand creams, how the winter had been hard on everyone's skin, how this particular formula would help. She unscrewed the lid, squeezed a small amount onto your hand, guided you to rub it in. Feel how smooth that is. Everything was tactile, sensory, personal. You were not just looking at products in a catalogue. You were experiencing them, touching them, smelling them, seeing them on your own skin. The Avon lady understood something fundamental. Beauty was not theoretical. It had to be felt. She never pressured. She suggested. She offered. She made you feel like buying was a gift to yourself, not an obligation. And when you did buy, when you filled out the order form and chose your item, she thanked you warmly, genuinely. She told you when your order would arrive, promised to bring it by personally, asked if there was anything else you needed. As she packed up her case, preparing to move on to the next house, you walked her to the door feeling lighter somehow. She had not just sold you lipstick. She had given you 15 minutes where you were not a mother, not a housewife, but simply a woman who deserved to feel beautiful. Stanley Home Products sold mops, brooms, cleaners, and brushes, but what they really sold was performance. The Stanley Party was a demonstration, a show where the hostess proved that these tools could tackle any household mess with ease. You watched as she scrubbed stubborn stains, polished floors to a shine, and made cleaning look almost effortless. The products were durable, well made, built to last, and because you saw them work with your own eyes, in a home just like yours, you believed. The living room became a stage, the housewife became a performer, and the audience became customers who walked away convinced they needed every brush in the catalogue. The Stanley Party had a different energy than a Tupperware gathering. It was less about aspiration and more about proof. The hostess didn't just talk about the products. She used them, right there in front of you, tackling real dirt, real stains, real problems that every housewife recognized immediately. She started by showing you the mop, a sturdy thing with a wide head and replaceable sponge. She talked about its features, the adjustable handle, the ringing mechanism, the durability of the materials, but then she stopped talking and started demonstrating. She poured something dark and sticky, soda maybe, or coffee, onto a section of her kitchen floor. You watched it spread, creating the kind of mess that would normally require scrubbing on hands and knees. She dipped the Stanley mop into a bucket of warm water, wrung it out with one easy motion, and began to clean. 3 passes, maybe 4, and the floor was spotless. She held up the mop, showing you the sponge, barely dirty. See how much it picks up? You leaned forward, impressed despite yourself. You had mopped floors 1,000 times, and it had never looked that easy. Next came the brushes. She held up a scrub brush, small enough to fit in your hand, but tough enough to tackle serious grime. She grabbed a pot from her kitchen, one with baked-on food crusted around the edges, the kind of mess that made you sigh just looking at it. She added a drop of Stanley cleaning solution, barely any at all, and began to scrub. The food came off in seconds, no soaking, no elbow grease, just quick, efficient cleaning. The women in the room murmured to each other, nodding, calculating whether they needed that brush, whether it would be worth the investment. The hostess moved on, showing them a floor brush, demonstrating how it reached into corners, how the bristles were firm enough to scrub but gentle enough not to scratch. She showed them a toilet brush with a holder that kept it sanitary. She showed them a dish brush that did not hold odours or bacteria. Every product had a purpose, a problem it solved, and every demonstration made you think about your own home, your own frustrations, the hours you spent every week trying to keep things clean. What if it could be easier? What if the right tools really did make that much difference? The Stanley hostess understood timing. She did not demonstrate everything at once. She paced it, building momentum, showing you one impressive thing after another until you were convinced that these products were not luxuries but necessities. By the time she finished, you were already mentally rearranging your budget, figuring out what you could afford, what you needed most urgently. The order forms came out and hands reached for them. Women clustered around the table, flipping through the catalogue, pointing at items, discussing which brushes they needed, whether the mop was worth the investment. The hostess circulated, answering questions, offering advice, never pushy but always helpful. When you left that party, you left believing that cleaning could be different. Not enjoyable, perhaps, but at least less exhausting. And that belief, sold through demonstration and proof, was worth every penny you spent. Fuller Brush started with men going door to door, but by the 1950s, women were stepping into the role as well. The brush man, or brush lady, carried a heavy case filled with every kind of brush imaginable. Brushes for dishes, for floors, for clothes, for teeth. Each one was crafted with care, designed to outlast cheaper alternatives. The sales pitch was simple, quality over convenience. You didn't buy a Fuller brush because it was trendy. You bought it because it worked, because it lasted, because your mother probably owned one and it still sat in her closet after 20 years. The Fuller representative understood this. They sold legacy, not just merchandise. The Fuller brush case was legendary, not just for what it contained, but for its sheer weight. When the representative set it down on your porch or in your kitchen, it landed with a solid thump, the sound of substance, of serious business. The case opened wide, revealing compartments and rows of brushes arranged with almost military precision. There were brushes you expected, scrub brushes, dish brushes, brooms. But there were also brushes you had never imagined needing. Bottle brushes in various sizes, radiator brushes for dusting those impossible-to-reach fins, lint brushes that actually removed pet hair, specialised brushes for Venetian blinds, for upholstery, for baseboards. The variety was overwhelming and impressive. For every surface in your home, Fuller had engineered a specific solution. The representative, whether man or woman, knew these brushes intimately. They could tell you not just what each brush did, but why it was designed that way, what made it superior to the generic version sold in hardware stores. They talked about bristle quality, about handle durability, about the thought and craftsmanship that went into every product. This was not mass-produced junk. This was quality, engineered to last. When women began selling Fuller products, they brought something additional to the pitch: understanding. A woman knew which household tasks were most frustrating, which tools broke too easily, which corners were impossible to clean. She had lived these problems. So when she demonstrated a Fuller brush, when she showed you how the angled bristles reached behind the toilet, or how the soft bristle brush cleaned lampshades without damage, she spoke from experience. The Fuller representative did not pressure you to buy everything. That would be absurd, and both of you knew it. Instead, they helped you identify your needs. What do you struggle with most? What tools do you replace constantly? What tasks take longer than they should? They listened, then they recommended, showing you 2 or 3 brushes that would genuinely make your life easier. The prices were higher than what you would pay at the 5 and dime. You knew that going in. But the Fuller representative explained the value, broke it down for you. This brush costs $3, yes. But the cheap one you buy for 50 cents breaks in 3 months. You will buy it 8 times, spending $4, and still end up frustrated. Buy the Fuller brush once. It lasts for years, and you save money in the long run. The logic was sound. The math made sense. And there was something else. Something harder to quantify but deeply felt. Buying Fuller was an act of pride. You were investing in your home. You were choosing quality. You were doing what your mother and grandmother had done, purchasing tools that would outlast trends and serve you faithfully year after year. When you made your purchase, the representative recorded it carefully, promised delivery within the week, and thanked you warmly. They handed you a small sample brush, a gift, something to use while you waited for your order. It was a gesture of goodwill, but it was also smart business. That little brush worked beautifully, and it made you think about all the other Fuller products you did not buy yet. Money was tight for many families in the 1950s. A single income often had to stretch across mortgage payments, groceries, clothing, and the occasional luxury. Housewives, eager to contribute financially, but limited by societal expectations and childcare responsibilities, found in-home sales an ideal solution. You could earn commission without a boss, set your own hours, and work around your family's needs. The income was not huge, but it was yours. It paid for extras, a new dress, a family outing, savings tucked away for emergencies. For many women, it was the first money they ever earned on their own terms, and that freedom, however modest, felt revolutionary. You started small, cautiously, almost apologetically. You signed up with Tupperware or Avon or Stanley, filled out the paperwork, attended the training session, and received your starter kit. The investment was minimal, $20 or $30, manageable even on a tight budget. The kit contained samples, catalogues, order forms, and a manual that explained commission structures and sales techniques. At first, you were not sure if you could do this. Selling felt forward, aggressive, unfeminine. You worried about what your neighbours would think, whether your husband would approve, whether you had any talent for business. But the money, even the possibility of money, was compelling. Your family needed it, even if your husband would never admit that aloud. Your first party was nerve-wracking. You invited friends, served cookies, demonstrated products with shaking hands. You stumbled over your pitch, forgot key features, felt your face flush with embarrassment. But at the end of the evening, 3 women placed orders. Small orders, nothing extravagant, but orders nonetheless. You calculated your commission that night at the kitchen table, checking the math twice, and felt a small thrill. $12. You had earned $12 in 2 hours. It did not sound like much. Your husband earned far more in a single day. But this was different. This money came from your effort, your words, your ability to connect with other women and help them see value in these products. It was yours in a way his paycheck never could be. The income grew gradually as you became more comfortable with the sales process. As you booked more parties and built relationships with regular customers, your earnings increased. Some months you made $30, some months $50. Once, during the Christmas season when everyone was buying gifts, you earned nearly $80 in a single month. It felt like a fortune. You kept the money separate from household funds, at least at first. You opened your own account at the bank, depositing your commission checks, with a sense of pride and independence. The bank teller knew you by name, smiled when you approached the counter, treated you like a businesswoman. It was a small thing, but it mattered. The money paid for things your family budget could not stretch to cover. New shoes for the children, a trip to the movies, a special dinner out for your anniversary. You bought yourself a new dress, the first one in 2 years, and wore it without guilt because you had earned it. You set aside savings for emergencies, a small cushion that gave you peace of mind. But more than the money itself, what you valued was the autonomy. You decided how to spend your earnings. You didn't have to ask permission or justify purchases. You had economic power, however modest, and it changed something fundamental in how you saw yourself. Home-based sales was not going to make you rich. You knew that. But it gave you agency, dignity, and proof that you were capable of more than cooking and cleaning. It gave you a role beyond wife and mother, an identity that was yours alone. Home parties were not just business. They were obligation. If your neighbour hosted a Tupperware party, you were expected to attend. If you hosted, you were expected to perform, to clean your house immaculately, to serve refreshments, to be charming and persuasive without seeming desperate. And your guests, your friends, they felt the pressure too. Attending meant buying something even if your budget was already stretched thin. Saying no felt rude, like rejecting not just the product but the hostess herself. So you bought the smallest item you could afford, smiled graciously, and hoped your own party would return the favour. It was commerce wrapped in courtesy, and the lines between friendship and transaction often blurred. The invitation arrived casually, delivered during a conversation at the mailbox or mentioned after church. "I'm hosting a little get-together Thursday afternoon. Would you like to come?" The phrasing was deliberately vague, friendly, social, but you both knew what it really was, a sales party. You smiled, said, "Of course, how lovely," and mentally checked your budget to see what you could afford to spend. You could not say no. Not really. Refusing would send a message that you did not support your friend's business, that you were not a team player, that you placed your own financial concerns above neighbourhood harmony. In a tight-knit suburban community where everyone knew everyone, where reputations were built on small gestures and destroyed by small slights, saying no carried consequences you could not afford. So you went. You arrived on time, bringing nothing because the hostess had insisted you didn't need to, but feeling vaguely uncomfortable arriving empty-handed. Other women were already there, settling into chairs, accepting coffee, making small talk. The atmosphere was friendly, but carried an undercurrent of tension. Everyone knew purchases were expected. Everyone was calculating what they could afford, what they actually needed, what they could buy that would satisfy the obligation without breaking the bank. The hostess was performing. You could see it in her smile, in the way she moved through the room with practiced enthusiasm. She demonstrated products, answered questions, laughed perhaps a bit too loudly at jokes that were not that funny. She was trying so hard, and you felt for her because you had been in her position. You knew how vulnerable it felt to host these parties, to need your friends to buy, to blend hospitality with commerce in a way that felt uncomfortable no matter how many times you did it. When the demonstration ended and the order forms came out, you picked up a catalogue and flipped through it slowly. You did not need any of these things, not really, but you needed to buy something. You scanned for the cheapest item that did not look pathetic. A small container, a lipstick, a single brush. Something that said, "I support you," without saying, "I can barely afford this." You filled out the form, handed over your money and smiled. The hostess thanked you warmly, but there was something in her eyes, a flicker of assessment, of whether you had bought enough, of whether she could count on you to host your own party soon, to return the favour. Because that was the unspoken agreement. I attend your party, I buy from you, and when I host, you attend mine and buy from me. It was reciprocity enforced through social pressure, a system that kept everyone trapped in a cycle of obligation. When it was your turn to host, the pressure multiplied. You spent days cleaning your house until it gleamed. You baked from scratch, something impressive but not so impressive. It made other women feel inadequate. You sent invitations, called friends, reminded them the day before. You worried constantly. What if no one comes? What if they come but do not buy? What if my party fails and I become the woman whose business could not get off the ground? The day of the party, you were exhausted before anyone arrived, but you pasted on a smile, greeted each guest warmly, and performed enthusiasm you did not quite feel. You demonstrated products, answered questions, laughed at the right moments. You watched your friends flip through catalogues, saw them calculate budgets in their heads, knew they were buying out of obligation just as you had done at their parties. And when it was over, when the orders were tallied and the commissions calculated, you felt relief mixed with guilt. You had succeeded, yes, but at the cost of making your friends spend money they might not have wanted to spend. The lines between friendship and business had blurred again, and you were not entirely comfortable with what remained. Companies like Tupperware and Avon did not just sell products, they sold dreams. They recruited housewives with promises of financial independence, flexible schedules, and the chance to build something of their own. Training sessions were held in living rooms, hotel conference rooms, or church basements. You learned sales techniques, memorized product lines, practiced demonstrations until they felt natural. You were taught to smile, to listen, to make every customer feel seen. And if you succeeded, you were encouraged to recruit others, building a network beneath you, earning commissions not just from your own sales but from theirs as well. It was the beginning of what would later be called multi-level marketing, but back then it simply felt like opportunity. The recruitment pitch was compelling. You saw an advertisement in the newspaper or received a phone call from a friend who had recently signed up. Earn money from home, set your own hours, be your own boss. The words were intoxicating, especially to women who felt trapped by domesticity, who longed for something more than endless housework and childcare. You attended an information session held in someone's living room or a community centre. A successful seller, polished and confident, stood at the front of the room and shared her story. She talked about how she started just like you, uncertain, nervous, juggling family responsibilities. But she took a chance, and now she was earning real money, hundreds of dollars a month, enough to make a difference. She dressed well, spoke with authority, and embodied the success she was selling. She talked about the products, yes, but mostly she talked about freedom. The freedom to contribute financially. The freedom to build something that was yours. The freedom to prove to yourself and others that you were capable of more. It was a pitch aimed directly at the quiet dissatisfaction many housewives felt but rarely voiced. You signed up that night, filling out the paperwork, writing a check for the starter kit, committing yourself to this new venture. The trainer handed you a welcome packet, scheduled your training sessions, and congratulated you on making a smart decision. You left feeling excited and terrified in equal measure. The training was intensive. You attended sessions where experienced sellers taught you everything: how to approach potential customers, how to demonstrate products effectively, how to handle objections, how to close a sale without seeming pushy. You memorized product features, practiced your pitch in front of mirrors and patient family members, learned to project confidence even when you felt uncertain. They taught you to smile constantly, to make eye contact, to listen more than you talked. They taught you to ask questions that uncovered needs, to position products as solutions rather than purchases. They taught you to handle rejection gracefully, to view every no as practice for the next yes. And then they taught you about recruiting. Once you were selling successfully, once you had proven you could do this, the company wanted you to bring others in. You were encouraged to watch for women who seemed interested, who asked too many questions about the business, who expressed frustration with their financial situations. You were taught to approach them gently, to share your own story, to make recruiting feel like offering a gift rather than pushing a business opportunity. The incentive was clear: recruit someone, and you earned a small commission from every sale they made. Recruit enough people, build a team, and your income could grow exponentially. You could become a manager, a leader, someone who earned not just from selling, but from building a network. It sounded almost too good to be true, and in some ways it was. The reality was that most sellers never recruited successfully, never built large teams, never achieved the levels of income the top performers enjoyed. But the dream was real enough to keep you trying, to keep you believing that maybe, just maybe, you could be one of the success stories. Most husbands tolerated their wives' home businesses, some even encouraged them, but few truly understood the work involved. Your husband saw the extra income, the new appliances purchased with your earnings, the pride you took in your success. But he did not see the hours spent organizing inventory, the evenings spent filling out order forms, the emotional labor of maintaining customer relationships. Some men felt threatened by their wives' independence. Others were proud but distant, treating it as a hobby rather than real work. And a few A precious few became partners, helping with bookkeeping, driving you to parties, cheering your successes as if they were their own. Your husband came home from work and found the living room rearranged again, furniture pushed aside to make space for displays. He paused in the doorway, tie loosened, briefcase in hand, looking at the transformation with an expression you could not quite read. "Having another party?" he asked, his tone carefully neutral. "Yes, Thursday afternoon." You did not apologize. You had stopped apologizing months ago. He nodded, set down his briefcase and walked through to the kitchen. He did not complain, not exactly, but you felt his discomfort in the way he navigated around the product stacks, in the way he asked when things would go back to normal. Normal meant a living room arranged for relaxation, not commerce. Normal meant a wife focused entirely on home and family, not splitting her attention between dinner and order forms. Some evenings, after the children were in bed, you sat at the dining room table with your paperwork spread out, calculating commissions, checking inventory, planning the next week's parties. Your husband read the newspaper in his chair, occasionally glancing over at you. "What are you working on?" he would ask, and you would explain, though you could tell he was not really listening, not in the way that mattered. He liked the money, that part was clear. When you bought a new washing machine with your earnings, he praised your thrift, your contribution. When you paid for family outings without touching his paycheck, he appreciated it openly. But he did not connect that income to the hours of labour it required. To him, the parties looked social, the sales looked easy, the whole enterprise looked like something less than real work. Other husbands were worse. You heard stories from women in your sales network, husbands who forbade their wives from continuing, who saw the business as a threat to their authority, who could not tolerate their wives earning money independently. One woman quit because her husband gave her an ultimatum: the business or the marriage. She chose the marriage, but something in her voice when she told you sounded hollow, defeated. And then there were the rare ones, the husbands who truly supported their wives. You met one at a regional sales meeting, a man who drove his wife to parties, helped her carry inventory, sat in the kitchen doing her bookkeeping while she hosted. He understood that her business was real work, that her success was their success. You watched them together and felt a pang of something, not quite envy, but longing. What would it be like to have that kind of partnership? Your own husband was somewhere in the middle. He did not oppose your business, but he did not champion it either. He tolerated it, appreciated the income, and occasionally made jokes about living in a warehouse. You learned to accept his ambivalence, to not need his validation, to find satisfaction in the work itself rather than in his approval. But sometimes, late at night, you wished he understood. You wished he could see that this was not just about selling products or earning extra money. It was about proving something to yourself, about building something that was yours, about finding purpose beyond the endless cycle of cooking and cleaning. You wished he could see you not just as his wife, but as a businesswoman. Most nights he could not, and so you stopped wishing and simply kept working. Your children learned early that the living room was not always theirs. When party day came, they were shuffled upstairs, told to play quietly, reminded not to interrupt. They grew accustomed to the sight of women gathering, the sound of laughter and demonstration, the smell of coffee brewing for guests who were not family. Some children resented it, feeling displaced in their own home. Others absorbed the lessons, that work could happen anywhere, that women could be entrepreneurs, that their mother was more than just a mother. They watched you negotiate, sell, succeed, and somewhere in their young minds a seed was planted about what was possible. Your daughter stood at the top of the stairs, peering through the banister rails at the women gathered below. She was supposed to be in her room, playing quietly, but curiosity had drawn her out. You caught her eye and gave her a gentle warning look. "Not now, sweetheart." She nodded, retreated, but you knew she was still listening, absorbing the rhythm of your sales pitch, the laughter, the sound of women talking business over coffee. Later, after the party ended and the guests had left, she came downstairs and wandered through the living room, touching the remaining product samples with careful fingers. "What is this one for?" she asked, holding up a small Tupperware container. "Keeping celery fresh," you explained, and she nodded seriously, as if this were vital information. Your son was less interested in the products but fascinated by the numbers. He was 8, old enough to understand money, and he watched you count your earnings with intense focus. "How much did you make today?" he asked. You hesitated, unsure whether to share, but he was looking at you with such genuine interest that you told him. $15 in commission. He considered this. "That is a lot," he said finally, and you smiled because to him it was. To him, you were successful, impressive, someone who could turn an afternoon of talking into tangible income. But not all moments were easy. Your youngest cried one afternoon, clinging to your skirt, upset that strangers were in the house, that you could not hold him, that everything felt different and wrong. You tried to soothe him while maintaining your composure in front of customers, balancing motherhood and business in a way that felt impossible. One of the women at the party, a mother herself, smiled sympathetically. "You are doing wonderfully," she said softly, and you nearly cried with gratitude. Your children learned to recognize party days by the signs, the living room rearranged, the smell of baking, your lipstick applied before noon. They knew to make themselves scarce, to entertain themselves, to not need you for those few hours. Some days they did it cheerfully, other days they sulked, resentful of the business that took you away from them, even while you remained physically in the house. But they also learned things you had, not intended to teach. Your daughter started playing store in her bedroom, lining up her dolls as customers, demonstrating imaginary products with the same gestures you used. She practiced your sales pitch, your tone, your confidence. You watched from the doorway once unseen and felt something complicated, pride mixed with concern. Was this good, this early introduction to commerce, or were you passing on pressures she should not have to carry? Your son told his teacher that his mother was a businesswoman. The teacher mentioned it during a parent conference, smiling, impressed. He is very proud of you. You had not known he felt that way. You had worried he resented the parties, the disruption, the times you were too busy to play. But pride? That was unexpected, precious. As they grew older, your children began to help. Your daughter folded brochures, organised samples, answered the phone when customers called. Your son helped carry inventory from the car, calculated totals, counted change. They became part of the business, small contributors to something larger than themselves. They saw you succeed. They saw you fail. They saw you juggle too many responsibilities and sometimes drop one. They saw you tired, stressed, overwhelmed. But they also saw you determined, capable, building something from nothing. Years later, your daughter would start her own business, and when you asked her where she learned to do that, she would shrug and say, "From watching you." And you would realize that all those parties, all those interruptions, all those moments when they were pushed aside, had taught them something valuable after all. That work and family could coexist, that mothers were whole people with ambitions, that living rooms could be more than one thing. In every neighbourhood, there were multiple women selling something. Down the street, Mrs. Henderson sold Avon. Around the corner, Mrs. Patterson hosted Tupperware parties. Your friend from church sold Stanley products. And you sold something else entirely. Competition was inevitable, but rarely spoken. You smiled at each other in the grocery store, exchanged pleasantries at school events, and quietly competed for the same pool of customers. You learned to differentiate yourself, to offer better service, to build deeper relationships. It was subtle, polite, cloaked in neighbourly kindness, but it was competition nonetheless. And the women who thrived were the ones who understood that business, even in a living room, required strategy. You stood in the checkout line at the grocery store unloading cans and produce when Mrs. Henderson appeared beside you. Her cart held the usual items plus a small tower of Avon catalogues. "Planning another party?" you asked, keeping your tone friendly, curious. "Just a small one," she replied, smiling. "Thursday evening. You are welcome to come, of course." The invitation was genuine, but you both understood the subtext. She was reminding you of her territory, her customer base, her upcoming event, and by inviting you, she was also subtly asserting confidence. She was not afraid of your presence. She knew her customers were loyal. You thanked her graciously, mentioned you already had plans, and watched her leave. The encounter was pleasant, cordial, perfectly polite, and beneath it all ran a current of competition neither of you would acknowledge directly. The neighbourhood could only support so many home businesses. There were only so many women with disposable income, only so many hours in the week for parties, only so much patience for sales pitches. Every customer you gained was potentially a customer someone else lost. Every party you booked was an evening when your neighbours could not book theirs. You learned quickly that differentiation mattered. Mrs. Henderson sold Avon, so you emphasised the unique features of your product line, the things Avon could not offer. Mrs. Patterson's Tupperware parties were casual, chatty affairs, so you made yours more structured, more informative, appealing to women who wanted efficiency over socialising. You found your niche, your angle, your way of standing out in a crowded market. Service became your weapon. You delivered orders personally, even when it was inconvenient. You remembered birthdays, sent thank you notes, followed up with customers to ensure they were satisfied. You built relationships that went beyond transactions, friendships that felt genuine even as they served business purposes, but you also watched your competitors, learned from them, borrowed techniques that worked. When Mrs. Patterson started offering hostess gifts, you did too. When Mrs. Henderson began hosting evening parties for working women, you adjusted your schedule to match. It was a delicate dance, copying without seeming to copy, innovating without alienating, competing without declaring war. Occasionally the competition turned uncomfortable. You heard through gossip that Mrs. Henderson had told someone your products were overpriced. You heard that Mrs. Patterson implied your parties were too serious, too focused on sales rather than fun. You never confronted them directly. Instead, you worked harder, improved your pitch, made your parties warmer and more welcoming. The church women's group became a minefield. Every gathering was an opportunity for subtle business promotion, for mentioning upcoming parties, for recruiting new customers. You learned to drop hints without being obvious, to plant seeds without seeming aggressive. You complimented Mrs. Henderson's lipstick, knowing she would mention where it came from. You admired Mrs. Patterson's storage solutions, opening the door for her to describe her business. It was exhausting, this constant positioning, this endless awareness of who was selling what to whom, but it was also necessary. The women who ignored the competition, who assumed loyalty was guaranteed, were the ones who struggled, who watched their customer base shrink, who eventually quit. You did not want to quit, so you stayed vigilant, strategic, always aware of the landscape shifting around you. You celebrated when you booked a party with someone who usually bought from Mrs. Henderson. You worried when one of your regular customers mentioned attending Mrs. Patterson's event. The neighbourhood was small, the market was smaller, and all of you were fighting, politely, quietly, with smiles and coffee and carefully worded invitations for the same limited resources. Selling required a delicate balance. Push too hard, and your neighbours labelled you aggressive, desperate. Push too softly, and you went home with empty order forms. You learned to read the room, to sense when someone was genuinely interested and when they were simply being polite. You asked questions, listened carefully, tailored your pitch to each person's needs. You never demanded, you suggested. You offered solutions, painted pictures of convenience and joy, and let your enthusiasm do the convincing. The best saleswomen were not the loudest. They were the ones who made you feel like buying was your idea all along. The first rule you learned was to stop talking. New sellers made the mistake of filling every silence with product information, overwhelming customers with features and benefits until eyes glazed over. But experienced sellers understood that silence was powerful. You made your point, then stopped. You let the customer think, process, imagine the product in their own home. You asked questions instead of making statements. Tell me about your kitchen storage situation. What frustrates you most about your current cleaning tools? How do you usually keep leftovers fresh? The questions made customers think about their problems, identify their needs, and once they articulated a problem, offering a solution felt natural, helpful, not pushy. You learned to listen for the signals. A woman who leaned forward, who picked up a product and turned it over in her hands, who asked specific questions about price or features, she was interested. A woman who sat back, who kept her arms crossed, who made vague comments about maybe thinking about it, she was not ready. You adjusted your approach accordingly, giving more information to the interested customer, backing off from the reluctant one. Enthusiasm mattered, but genuine enthusiasm, not the forced, brittle cheerfulness that made people uncomfortable. You talked about products you actually believed in, shared stories about how they had helped you, spoke from experience rather than from a script. When you demonstrated a product, you showed real problems it solved. You did not just say, "This bowl keeps food fresh." You said, "I used to throw away so much food, wilted vegetables, stale bread. But since I started using these containers, my groceries last twice as long. I am saving money every week." Personal stories worked because they were relatable, believable. They transformed products from things to solutions. And women who saw themselves in your stories, who recognized their own frustrations, were women who bought. You also learned the art of the soft close. You never said, "So, are you going to buy this?" That put pressure, created resistance. Instead, you said, "Which colour do you prefer? Or would you like me to put you down for the small set or the large one?" You assumed the sale was happening and simply asked for details. Often, customers went along because refusing required more effort than agreeing, but you also recognised when to stop. If a customer said no twice, you backed off gracefully. You smiled, said, "That is perfectly fine," and moved on. Pushing further damaged relationships, created resentment, turned neighbours into people who avoided you in the grocery store. One lost sale was acceptable, a ruined friendship was not. You also learned to handle objections without arguing. When someone said these are too expensive, you did not contradict them. You acknowledged their concern. "I understand, quality products do cost more up front." Then you reframed. "But let me show you why they're actually more economical in the long run." You validated their feelings while gently offering a different perspective. The best sales happened when customers convinced themselves. You provided information, answered questions, demonstrated benefits, and then stepped back. You let them imagine the product in their home, picture themselves using it, calculate the value for themselves. When they reached for the order form, you knew you had succeeded not through pressure, but through patience. You watched other sellers to learn what worked and what did not. The aggressive ones who cornered people at parties, who made elaborate speeches, who practically begged for sales, they struggled. Customers felt uncomfortable, obligated, resentful. The subtle ones, who built relationships first and sold second, who made people feel understood rather than targeted, they thrived. You became one of the subtle ones. You learned to plant seeds rather than demand harvests. You mentioned products casually in conversation, demonstrated them without fanfare, followed up gently without nagging. You made selling look effortless, natural, just part of being a helpful friend. And your neighbours bought, not because you pushed them, but because you made them want to. Your home was not designed to be a warehouse. Yet here you were, storing boxes of Tupperware in the hall closet, stacking Avon samples on your bedroom dresser, hiding fuller brushes under the guest bed. Inventory management became a daily challenge. You rotated stock, kept meticulous records, and prayed nothing got damaged or lost. Your husband complained about tripping over boxes. Your children used empty Tupperware containers as building blocks. The garage became off-limits, filled with next month's orders. It was chaotic, cramped, and often overwhelming. But it was also proof that your business was real, growing, taking up space in ways that could no longer be ignored. The boxes arrived every 2 weeks, delivered by truck, stacked on your porch in the early afternoon when you were usually home alone. The driver knew your name, knew to ring the bell twice, knew you needed help carrying the larger shipments inside. You signed for the delivery, thanked him, and immediately began the process of sorting, checking, organising. You opened each box carefully, comparing contents against the packing slip, making sure nothing was missing or damaged. The product catalogues you ordered stacked neatly, the sample containers wrapped in tissue, the full-size inventory you had purchased to have on hand for immediate sales. Everything had to be accounted for, recorded in your logbook, assigned a place in your already overcrowded storage system. The hall closet was your primary warehouse. You had removed winter coats and old linens, claiming the space entirely for business. Shelves held inventory organised by product type and size. You could open that closet in the dark and find exactly what you needed by feel alone. But the closet was reaching capacity. Boxes stacked floor to ceiling, products crammed onto every shelf, new shipments requiring creative rearrangement just to fit. Your bedroom became auxiliary storage. The dresser top held Avon samples arranged in small baskets, lipsticks and perfumes lined up like soldiers. Your husband tolerated it, mostly, though he occasionally muttered about not being able to set down his wallet without knocking over a bottle of hand cream. The space under the bed held larger items, boxes of brushes, demonstration supplies, the vacuum cleaner sample you were not currently using. The garage was your overflow solution. You claimed half of it, the half your husband was not using for tools, and filled it with long-term inventory. Future stock, seasonal items, extra supplies. You organised it meticulously because finding anything in the garage required a system. You labelled boxes, created a map, updated it every time you added or removed something. But even with all this storage, space was constantly a problem. Your business was growing, which meant more inventory, more samples, more boxes arriving every 2 weeks. You were always reorganising, always shifting things around, always trying to fit more into spaces that were already full. Your children adapted. They learned not to touch the boxes in the hall. They learned that some closets were off limits. They learned to navigate around stacks of products the way other children navigated around furniture. Your daughter once brought a friend home from school, and the girl stared at the inventory stacked in the hallway. "Is your mum opening a store?" she asked. "Sort of," your daughter replied, unbothered. Your husband was less adaptable. He tripped over a box in the hallway one evening, barked his shin, and spent 10 minutes complaining about living in a warehouse. You apologised, moved the box, and quietly resented his lack of appreciation for what the business was providing. The new television in the living room, where did he think that came from? The family vacation you were planning, who did he think was paying for it? Inventory management required constant vigilance. You tracked every item, noted every sale, reordered before you ran out. You could not afford to tell a customer, "Sorry, I do not have that in stock right now." That meant lost sales, disappointed customers, damage to your reputation. So you kept more inventory than you probably needed just in case, and accepted the chaos that came with it. Sometimes you dreamed of having a real storage space, a separate room or a small shed, somewhere the business could exist without invading every corner of your home. But that required money you did not have, permission from your husband you probably would not get, and an acknowledgement that this business was permanent rather than temporary. So you made do. You organized, reorganized, and organized again. You claimed every spare inch of space. You turned your home into a hybrid of residence and warehouse, accepting the inconvenience as the price of success. Selling to friends meant walking a tightrope between relationship and transaction. You cared about these women. You knew their struggles, their joys, their budgets, and yet you also needed them to buy. You smiled through the tension, never letting them see the pressure you felt to meet quotas. You celebrated their purchases as if they were doing you a favor, which in a way they were, but it wore on you, this constant blending of commerce and connection. You wondered sometimes if they bought because they wanted your products, or because they wanted to support you, and you were never quite sure which answer you preferred. Your closest friend Barbara attended every party you hosted. She bought something each time, always something small but meaningful, a lipstick, a storage container, a brush. You appreciated her support genuinely, but you also worried that she bought out of obligation, out of loyalty to your friendship rather than genuine need. One afternoon, sitting together at her kitchen table while your children played in the yard, she mentioned money was tight. Her husband's hours had been cut. They were falling behind on bills. Your heart ached for her, and immediately you wondered guiltily whether you should still invite her to your next party, whether it was fair to put her in a position where she felt obligated to buy when she could barely afford groceries. But you also needed sales. Your quota was looming. Every party mattered. You invited her anyway. You told yourself she could simply say no, could attend without buying, could make her own choices, but you knew, and she knew, that saying no meant more than declining a purchase. It meant acknowledging her financial struggle publicly, admitting she could not afford what other women at the party could. It meant the awkwardness of sitting there, empty-handed while others filled out order forms. She came. She bought a small bowl, the cheapest item in the catalogue. She smiled, said it was perfect, thanked you for hosting. You accepted her order form and felt like you were taking money she needed for something else. Later, alone, you counted your commissions and felt sick. You had earned 63 cents from Barbara's purchase, less than $1, taken from a woman who could not afford it. You told yourself she made her own choice, that you had not pressured her, that business was business. But it did not ease the guilt. The emotional labour of selling to friends was exhausting in ways you had not anticipated. You had to remember everyone's circumstances, their sensitivities, their financial situations. You had to calibrate your pitch differently for each person, pushing harder with those who could afford it, softening with those who could not. You had to read faces for signs of discomfort, for the moment when enthusiasm became obligation, for the point where you needed to back off. You also had to manage your own emotions. When a friend did not buy, you could not let yourself feel rejected, could not let it damage the relationship. You had to separate business disappointment from personal hurt, had to smile and say, "That is fine, really. I am just glad you came," and mean it. When friends bought large orders, you had to celebrate appropriately without seeming too focused on the money. You had to express gratitude without making it transactional. Thank you so much. You are going to love these products. Not thank you for the large commission. Some friendships deepened through the business. Women who became regular customers also became closer friends. You spent more time together, shared more of your lives, built bonds strengthened by mutual support. They bought from you. You supported them in other ways. The relationship felt balanced, reciprocal. Other friendships strained. Women who could not afford to buy regularly began avoiding your parties, your phone calls. They felt guilty for not supporting you. You felt guilty for making them feel guilty. The distance grew quietly, neither of you acknowledging the real reason, both of you pretending it was just life getting busy. You learned to compartmentalize, to separate your role as friend from your role as seller. When you were at church or the park or the grocery store, you were just you, just a friend, not a saleswoman. But at parties, in business mode, you had to shift, had to become someone more assertive, more focused on results. The blurring exhausted you. There were moments when you wished you could sell to strangers, people you did not care about, people whose financial struggles did not keep you awake at night. But stranger selling was not an option. Your business model required social networks, trusted relationships, community connections. So you accepted the emotional toll. You carried the guilt, the worry, the constant calculation of who could afford what and how hard you could push. You smiled through parties while internally struggling with the ethics of what you were doing. Because this was the price of running a business built on friendship. And you could not afford to stop. Every month brought new targets. Your company expected sales, growth, momentum. If you did not meet your quota, you lost bonuses, status, sometimes even your discount on products. The pressure was quiet but relentless. You booked more parties, reached out to more neighbours, pushed yourself harder. Success meant recognition, rewards, the validation that you were good at this. Failure meant disappointment, financial strain, and the nagging fear that maybe you were not cut out for sales after all. But you kept going, because quitting felt like admitting defeat, and you had worked too hard to let that happen. The quota sheet arrived at the beginning of each month, tucked into your newsletter from the company. Minimum sales to maintain active status, higher targets for bonuses, even higher targets for recognition and prizes. You looked at the numbers and felt your stomach tighten. The targets had increased again. Every quarter they crept higher, the company pushing sellers to sell more, recruit more, expand more. You sat at your kitchen table with last month's sales records spread before you. You had met quota, barely, after a frantic final week of last-minute parties and phone calls to every customer you could think of. But meeting quota was no longer enough. You wanted to qualify for the bonus, wanted to earn the prize, wanted to be recognised at the regional meeting as a top seller. You did the math. To hit bonus level, you needed to double last month's sales. Double. You stared at the number, trying to figure out how. You were already hosting 2 parties a week. You were already calling every potential customer you knew. How were you supposed to find more sales? The pressure came not just from the company, but from yourself. You had started this business with specific goals. Contribute financially, prove your capability, build something meaningful. Falling short felt like failing, not just at business, but at those deeper ambitions. Every month that you did not meet quota felt like evidence that maybe you were not as capable as you believed. You began waking in the middle of the night, mentally reviewing your upcoming schedule, counting potential sales, worrying about whether it would be enough. Your husband slept beside you, oblivious, while you calculated commissions in the dark. The company's incentive structure was brilliant and cruel. They dangled prizes, recognition, status, always just slightly out of reach. Hit this target and earn a free product set. Hit that target and get featured in the newsletter. Hit an even higher target and qualify for the annual conference. Each prize motivated you to work harder, sell more, sacrifice more time and energy. But the structure also created constant anxiety. You could never rest, never feel satisfied with your performance, because there was always another level, another target, another goal to chase. Even your best months felt insufficient because you could have done more, sold more, tried harder. Other sellers felt the same pressure. You saw it at regional meetings, in the too bright smiles, the forced enthusiasm, the way everyone compared sales numbers with the careful casualness of people pretending not to care while caring deeply. You heard it in phone calls with your upline, the gentle suggestions that felt like criticism, the reminders that you had so much potential if only you pushed a little harder. The end of each month became a race. You looked at your sales total, calculated how far you were from quota, and launched into frantic action. You called customers who had not bought in months. You offered special deals, discounts you probably should not have offered. You hosted emergency parties, squeezing one more event into an already exhausting schedule. You stayed up late filling out order forms, organising inventory, doing whatever it took to reach that number. When you met quota, the relief was profound but temporary. You celebrated for a moment, then received next month's targets, and felt the pressure begin again. When you fell short, the disappointment was crushing. You felt like you had let yourself down, let your customers down, let the company down. Your upline called to check in, voice sympathetic but also subtly probing. What happened? What could you do differently next month? You considered quitting more than once. The pressure was exhausting, the anxiety constant. But quitting meant admitting you could not do this, meant walking away from the income your family had come to depend on, meant returning to being just a housewife with no identity beyond your home. So you did not quit. You set your jaw, looked at next month's targets, and began planning. More parties, more calls, more effort. Because the only way out was through, and you were too stubborn to stop now. For many housewives, home-based sales represented something profound. The possibility of financial independence. You earned money that was yours, not your husband's. You controlled how it was spent, saved, invested. It was not a fortune, but it was freedom. Freedom to buy yourself something without asking permission. Freedom to contribute to household expenses. Freedom to prove to yourself and others that you were capable of more than cooking and cleaning. The dream was not about getting rich. It was about having agency, dignity, and a piece of economic power in a world that rarely granted women such things. You opened your own bank account on a Tuesday afternoon, walking into the branch with your first month's commission check folded carefully in your purse. The teller looked at you with mild surprise when you said you wanted your own account, not a joint one, but she processed the paperwork without comment. You signed your name, made your first deposit, and walked out with a bank book that had only your name printed on it. The amount was small, $43, but it was yours in a way money had never been before. Every dollar in that account came from your effort, your words, your ability to connect with customers and close sales. Your husband's paycheck was family money, allocated to mortgage, groceries, bills. This was your money, earned independently, controlled entirely. You did not tell your husband about the account immediately. It felt important to keep it private for a while, to protect this small space of financial autonomy. When you finally mentioned it, he seemed puzzled. "Why do you need your own account?" he asked. His tone was not accusatory, just confused. "We share everything." You struggled to explain. It was not about distrust or secrecy. It was about having something that was yours, about proving to yourself that you could earn money, manage it responsibly, make financial decisions without asking permission. He did not fully understand, but he did not object. The account grew slowly. Some months you added $50, some months only $20. Once, after a particularly successful party season, you deposited $90 and felt genuinely wealthy. You did not touch the money except for specific purposes, things you wanted but did not need, small luxuries your family budget would never stretch to cover. You bought yourself a new dress, the first one in 3 years that was not a hand-me-down or a practical purchase, justified by necessity. You stood in the department store trying on something beautiful just because you liked it and paid with money you had earned. The feeling was indescribable. No guilt, no justification, no need to explain to anyone why you deserved this. You took your children to the movies without asking your husband if the family could afford it. You bought birthday presents for friends from your own funds. You set aside savings for emergencies, a small cushion that gave you peace of mind. You were not dependent entirely on your husband's income. You could contribute. You could manage unexpected expenses. You had options. The independence was not just financial, it was psychological. You walked differently knowing you had your own money. You spoke more confidently knowing you contributed to the household income. You felt less like someone's wife and more like a complete person, someone with capabilities extending beyond domestic duties. Other women in your sales network felt the same. You heard it in conversations at regional meetings, in hushed discussions over coffee. The money was important, yes, but the independence was transformative. Women who had never controlled their own finances suddenly had bank accounts, savings, economic agency. Women who had always asked permission before buying anything could now make purchases without justification. The company understood this. Their recruitment materials emphasized freedom, independence, being your own boss. They knew they were selling more than products. They were selling autonomy to women who had been denied it by a society that expected them to be financially dependent on their husbands. But the independence came with complications. Your husband, while not objecting to your account, sometimes seemed uncomfortable with your financial autonomy. He made comments about your spending, questioned purchases, reminded you that he was still the primary breadwinner. The traditional power dynamic was shifting slightly, and neither of you knew quite how to navigate the change. You also felt guilt when you spent money on yourself. You'd been trained your entire life to be selfless, to prioritize family needs over personal wants. Having your own money challenged that conditioning but did not erase it. Every purchase for yourself required internal justification, a reminder that you earned this money and deserved to enjoy it. Still, you protected your account fiercely. It represented something too important to risk. Your husband could not take it away, could not control it, could not make decisions about how it was spent. In a world that gave women very few spaces of true autonomy, this account was yours, and that meant everything. By the late 50s and into the 60s, the home party model was everywhere. But cracks were beginning to show. Women were starting to enter the workforce in greater numbers. Suburban neighborhoods were spreading out, making it harder to gather. And the products themselves, once revolutionary, were now available in stores. The convenience that once made home sales essential was fading. Women still hosted parties, still sold, but the golden age was waning. The living room store, once a symbol of entrepreneurial spirit, was slowly giving way to shopping malls and career ambitions that extended beyond the front door. The signs were subtle at first. Parties that used to book easily now required more effort, more phone calls, more cajoling. Women who once attended regularly started declining invitations, citing work schedules, lack of time, other commitments. The excuses were polite, but the message was clear. Home parties were no longer a priority. You noticed the shift in your own sales patterns. The peak years had been 56 through 59, when parties filled your calendar, when women gathered eagerly, when sales came easily. But by 1961, something had changed. Bookings slowed, sales plateaued. The enthusiasm that once greeted your invitations had cooled to polite interest. The workforce was pulling women away. Teaching positions opened up. Secretarial jobs expanded. Opportunities that had been scarce in the early 50s were now available, and women were taking them. Full-time jobs paid better than home sales, offered benefits, provided professional identity. Why host parties for inconsistent commission when you could earn a steady salary? The suburbs were sprawling too, spreading out in ways that made casual gathering harder. Neighbourhoods that once felt intimate, where every housewife knew every other, were now subdivisions of strangers. New families moved in constantly. The tight-knit communities that made home party sales thrive were fragmenting, replaced by transient populations who did not have time to build the relationships that commerce required. And the products were changing. Tupperware, once sold exclusively through home parties, was starting to appear in department stores. Avon faced competition from drugstore cosmetics lines. The exclusivity that made home sales special was eroding. Why attend a party and feel obligated to buy when you could browse the same products in a store, alone, with no social pressure? You tried to adapt. You scheduled evening parties for working women. You offered shorter, more efficient demonstrations for busy schedules. You emphasized the social aspect, framing parties as rare opportunities for women to gather rather than just shopping opportunities. Sometimes it worked, often it did not. Other sellers in your network were quitting. You heard about it through your upline, through regional meeting announcements. Women who had been top sellers were stepping away, citing family obligations or work conflicts or simple burnout. The turnover was increasing. The company tried to recruit aggressively to replace lost sellers, but recruiting was harder now. The pitch that worked in 55, earn money from home, set your own hours, did not resonate the same way in 62 when women had other options. The company adapted too, lowering quotas, offering new incentives, introducing new product lines. But they were fighting demographic and economic shifts larger than any sales strategy could overcome. The 1950s model of homebound housewives with time and social networks was disappearing, replaced by working women with schedules and autonomy. You held on longer than most. Your business had become part of your identity, part of how you saw yourself and how others saw you. Quitting felt like losing something fundamental. But even you recognized that the golden age had passed. Parties were smaller, sales were slower, the excitement was gone. By the mid-60s, you were hosting one party a month instead of 2 per week. Your income had dropped by more than half. You still called yourself a businesswoman, still maintained your inventory, still sent out invitations. But increasingly, you were going through motions rather than building momentum. The living room store era was ending. Not all at once, not dramatically, but gradually, inevitably. The social and economic conditions that made it thrive were disappearing, replaced by a world where women's ambitions extended beyond homes, beyond neighborhoods, beyond the careful choreography of commerce and coffee in someone's living room. Hosting a Tupperware party came with rewards. You earned hostess gifts, free products, discounted items, exclusive pieces not available in stores. The more your guests bought, the more you earned. It was a brilliant system, turning customers into recruiters and making every party a potential sales event for both the company and the hostess. You invited friends not just to socialize, but to help you earn that coveted cake carrier or the new salad bowl set. The incentive system made hosting feel less like work and more like a game, one where everyone could win if they played along. The rewards chart arrived with every sales kit, a glossy page showing the prizes available at each level of party sales. $20 in sales earned you a small bowl set. $50 earned a larger container collection. $100 earned the piece everyone wanted. The cake carrier with its elegant domed lid, the crown jewel of any Tupperware collection. You studied that chart carefully, planning your party strategy around which prize you wanted most. You circled items, calculated what level of sales you needed, figured out how many guests would have to buy, and how much they would need to spend. The math was motivating. The prizes were tangible, visible, things you could imagine yourself using and owning. When you hosted, You mentioned the prizes casually to your guests. I am hoping we reach $50 tonight, so I can earn that picture set. The statement was strategic. It turned sales into a collaborative goal. Your guests were not just shopping for themselves, they were helping you earn something. The social pressure to buy increased when purchases benefited the hostess directly. The system worked brilliantly because it created multiple layers of motivation. The company wanted sales, you wanted prizes and commissions, your guests wanted products and social connection. Everyone got something, and the party format brought it all together. The exclusive items were particularly compelling. Certain pieces were only available as hostess gifts, never sold directly. If you wanted that special bowl or that unique container, you had to host a party and reach the sales threshold. The exclusivity made hosting feel special, made the rewards feel more valuable than their actual cost. You watched your guests help you reach sales goals. They calculated along with you. Only $15 more and you will earn the cake carrier. Should I add another bowl to my order? The group effort created excitement, transformed shopping into a shared mission. Women bought items they might not have chosen otherwise, motivated by the desire to help you succeed. When you reached your sales goal and earned your prize, the company made a small celebration of it. They presented it at the end of the party, wrapped beautifully while your guests applauded. You felt appreciated, successful, validated. The prize was proof that you had hosted well, that your friends supported you, that you were capable. Some hostesses chased prizes competitively. They booked multiple parties in a month, aiming for the highest reward levels, collecting exclusive items. The prizes became status symbols, markers of success visible in their homes. Other hostesses who saw these collections felt motivated to host their own parties, to earn their own prizes, to join the ranks of successful Tupperware hostesses. The incentive system also drove recruitment. Successful hostesses were prime candidates for becoming sellers. "You're so good at this," your upline would say. "Have you thought about selling?" The transition from hostess to seller felt natural because you had already learned the process, already understood the products, already proven you could generate sales. You earned dozens of prizes over your years of hosting and selling. They filled your cabinets, organized your kitchen, served as constant reminders of your business success. Each piece told a story. The bowl set from your first party as a hostess, the picture from the party where you exceeded your sales goal by $30, the cake carrier you finally earned after 3 attempts. But the prizes also represented something more complex. The way the company had gamified your labor, turned your social relationships into sales opportunities, made you work harder by dangling rewards just slightly out of reach. You loved earning them. But you also recognized, somewhere in the back of your mind, that you were being manipulated, motivated, managed through an incentive structure designed to extract maximum effort for minimal cost. Still, when you opened your cabinet and saw those Tupperware prizes lined up in their cheerful colors, you felt pride. You had earned them, every one, through effort and skill and the careful cultivation of community commerce. And that counted for something. Avon and similar companies understood something fundamental. Women wanted to feel beautiful, but they also wanted to feel understood. The beauty routine became a sales opportunity, not through pressure, but through connection. The Avon lady did not just hand you a lipstick, she sat with you, asked about your life, your preferences, your insecurities. She made recommendations tailored to you. She made you feel seen. And when you bought, it was not just a transaction. It was an affirmation that you deserved to invest in yourself, even if only in small ways. She arrived with her case and immediately created intimacy. She did not rush through product presentations. She asked questions that had nothing to do with sales. How are the children? How is your mother feeling? Did you ever try that recipe I mentioned? She built relationship first, business second, understanding that beauty purchases were deeply personal, tied to self-esteem and identity in ways that dish soap and storage containers were not. When she finally opened her case and pulled out samples, she framed them in terms of your life, your needs. You mentioned you were tired. This concealer works wonders for under-eye circles. You said you had a special event coming up. Let me show you a lipstick that would be perfect. Every suggestion felt personalized, chosen specifically for you, even though she made similar suggestions to dozens of women every week. She understood that most housewives in the 1950s spent their days in practical clothing, minimal makeup, focused on children and chores. Beauty felt like a luxury they could not justify, time they could not spare. So the Avon lady reframed it. Taking care of yourself is not selfish. You deserve to feel beautiful. 5 minutes with good lipstick and you will feel ready to face anything. The message resonated because it gave women permission. Permission to spend money on themselves. Permission to take time for beauty routines. Permission to want to look nice even when no one but family would see them. The Avon lady validated desires that society often dismissed as vanity. She also made beauty accessible. Department store cosmetics counters were intimidating, stuffed by immaculately made-up women who made ordinary housewives feel inadequate. But the Avon lady came to your kitchen, sat at your table, treated you like an equal. She wore nice lipstick, but also wedding ring and sensible shoes. She was one of you, not some glamorous stranger, and that made her recommendations feel achievable rather than aspirational. She let you try everything. She handed you samples, encouraged you to test lipsticks on your hand, smell perfumes on your wrist. The tactile experience made products feel real, made it easier to imagine incorporating them into your daily routine. And once you smelled a perfume you loved or saw a lipstick shade that brightened your whole face, walking away without buying felt like denying yourself something wonderful. The prices were reasonable, positioned carefully between too cheap, which suggested poor quality, and too expensive, which would exclude most housewives. $3 for lipstick, $2 for hand cream. Prices that required thought, but did not require sacrifice. You could afford 1 or 2 items without guilt, could justify the purchase as self-care rather than extravagance. The Avon lady also offered payment plans for larger orders. You did not have to pay everything up front. You could spread purchases across weeks, making beauty products feel even more accessible. She trusted you to pay, treated you like a responsible adult, and that trust created loyalty. When you bought, she packaged everything beautifully. Even small purchases were wrapped carefully, handed to you like gifts. The presentation reinforced the message that you deserved nice things, that beauty products were special, valuable, worth treating with care. She followed up weeks later, not to push more sales, but to ask how you liked your purchases. Does that lipstick work for you? Are you happy with the face cream? The follow-up was ostensibly about customer service, but it also kept her in your mind, kept the relationship active, made you more likely to buy again. Some women bought from the Avon lady monthly, building collections of lipsticks and perfumes, investing regularly in their appearance. Others bought occasionally, treating themselves when money allowed, or when they needed a boost. But nearly every woman bought eventually, because the Avon lady made beauty feel necessary, achievable, and deeply personal. And in those small purchases, in that lipstick applied before guests arrived, or that perfume worn on difficult days, women found small acts of rebellion against the drudgery of domesticity. They found moments of self-recognition, reminders that they were more than mothers and wives, that they were women who deserved to feel beautiful. The product catalogue was more than a list of items. It was a portal to a better, more modern life. You flip through pages showing gleaming kitchens, organized closets, spotless floors, beautiful women smiling with confidence. You imagined your own home transformed, your own life elevated by these simple tools. The catalogue made you dream. And those dreams, however modest, made you reach for your order form. The power of the catalogue was not just in what it sold, but in what it promised. A version of yourself and your home that felt just within reach. The catalogues arrived quarterly, glossy and thick, smelling of fresh ink and possibility. You sat at your kitchen table with coffee cooling in your cup and flipped slowly through pages that showed lives you wanted to live. The photography was careful, deliberate, aspirational, but not impossibly so. The kitchens were clean but looked lived in. The women were attractive but recognizable. Not movie stars, just ordinary women made extraordinary by the products surrounding them. You lingered on certain pages, the one showing a woman opening a refrigerator organized with neat rows of Tupperware, every container labeled, every leftover visible and fresh. Your own refrigerator was chaos, mystery casseroles forgotten in the back, wilted vegetables buried under jars, but looking at that photograph, you could imagine transformation. You could see yourself as that woman, organized, efficient, in control. The catalogue copy was brilliant. It did not just describe products, it described transformations. This storage set does not just hold food, it saves you money, reduces waste, gives you peace of mind when you open your refrigerator and actually know what is inside. The tech spoke directly to your frustrations, named problems you experience daily, and offered solutions that seemed both practical and attainable. You folded down corners of pages showing items you wanted. Sometimes you circle things directly in the catalogue, marking your desires in ink. The act of marking felt like commitment, like moving from vague wanting toward actual purchasing. You calculated prices, added up totals, figured out what you could afford this month and what would have to wait. The catalogue also functioned as entertainment. On quiet afternoons when children napped and housework was finished, you paged through it like some women read magazines. You studied room layouts, noticed how products were styled, absorbed the aesthetics of modern homemaking. The catalogue taught you what your home should look like, what tools you should own, what version of housewife you should aspire to become. You showed pages to your husband sometimes, pointing out items you thought the family needed. Look, this mop system would make cleaning so much easier. This food storage would keep groceries fresh longer. We would save money. You framed purchases as investments, practical solutions to household problems. You rarely mentioned wanting things simply because they were beautiful, because wanting for aesthetic reasons felt too frivolous to justify. Your children looked at catalogues too, making their own wish lists, pointing at toys or colourful containers they wanted for their rooms. The catalogue became family entertainment, a source of shared dreaming. What would we buy if we could buy anything? The game was hypothetical but revealed desires, priorities, values. As a seller, you used catalogues strategically. You brought multiple copies to parties, handed them out freely, encouraged women to browse while you demonstrated products. You knew the catalogue sold even when you were not there, that women took them home and flipped through at leisure, building desire slowly until they called with orders. You pointed out specific pages during demonstrations. This is on page 12 if you want to see the full set. The catalogue provided context, showed products in homes rather than on your coffee table, helped customers imagine ownership. The photography did half your sales work, creating scenarios that were more compelling than anything you could say. The seasonal catalogues were especially powerful. Spring catalogue showed picnic supplies and outdoor items, planting seeds for summer purchases. Fall catalogues emphasized organization and preparation, positioning products as tools for managing busy school year schedules. Holiday catalogues transformed practical items into gift possibilities, reframing storage containers and beauty products as presents that showed care and thoughtfulness. You kept old catalogues, stacking them on a shelf, occasionally referring back to discontinued items or comparing product evolution. The catalogues became a record of your business, markers of time passing, evidence of how products and marketing changed year by year. But more than anything, the catalogue was hope. Hope that your life could be easier, more organised, more beautiful. Hope that the right products could solve problems that felt overwhelming. Hope that transformation was possible, achievable, affordable. And that hope, printed on glossy pages and delivered quarterly, was what really kept you ordering, kept you selling, kept you believing that a better version of home and self was just one purchase away. Your living room, during a party, became a stage. You were the performer, your products the props, your friends the audience. You smiled, gestured, told stories. You made the mundane magical. You turned a plastic bowl into a symbol of modern convenience. You transformed a lipstick into a confidence boost. You understood, perhaps better than anyone, that sales were not just about features and benefits. They were about emotion, aspiration, connection. And in that small, familiar space, you created something memorable, something that made your neighbours want to return, not just for the products, but for the experience. You prepared your stage carefully. Lighting mattered. You opened curtains to let in natural light, but also turned on lamps to create warmth, atmosphere. You wanted brightness without harshness, illumination that made products look appealing and faces look friendly. You tested different arrangements until you found the setup that felt most inviting. Your blocking was intentional. You positioned yourself where everyone could see you, where you could make eye contact with each guest. You arranged seating in a loose semicircle, intimate enough for conversation but structured enough that everyone faced the demonstration area. You learned early that scattered seating killed energy, made the party feel disjointed. Gathered seating created focus, engagement, momentum. You choreographed your movements. You picked up products with deliberate gestures, held them at eye level, turned them slowly so everyone could see. You moved around the room as you talked, bringing products directly to guests, encouraging them to touch, to hold, to experience. You learned that static demonstrations were boring, that movement created energy, kept attention focused. Your voice was an instrument. You modulated tone, varied pace, used pauses strategically. You spoke clearly but conversationally, projecting without shouting. You practiced inflection, learned to emphasize key words, to let excitement color your voice naturally. You told stories with dramatic flair, building tension and resolution, making even ordinary anecdotes about leftovers or cleaning feel engaging. You used humor carefully. Self-deprecating jokes about your own household disasters made you relatable, human. You laughed at spills during demonstrations, turned mistakes into comedic moments that relaxed everyone. But you never made jokes that undermined your products or your competence. The humour supported the performance rather than sabotaging it. You read your audience constantly. You watched faces for signs of engagement or boredom, adjusted your pacing accordingly. If attention wandered, you shifted tactics, pulled out a different product, asked a question to re-engage. If energy was high, you rode the momentum, kept moving, built toward the natural closing moment when enthusiasm translated into purchases. You created moments of spectacle. The Tupperware burp was your signature trick. You sealed a container, turned it upside down over someone's head, let the drama build before showing that not a drop leaked. The demonstration was silly, theatrical, but it worked every time. Women gasped, laughed, applauded. They remembered that moment, talked about it later, associated your parties with entertainment. You involved your audience. You handed products to guests, asked them to try sealing containers or testing brushes. You made them participants rather than passive observers. The involvement created investment, made them feel part of the experience rather than just targets for sales. You built to a climax. You saved your best products for late in the demonstration when energy was highest and wallets were loosening. You created anticipation, teased upcoming items, made women curious about what was coming next. The structure was intentional, designed to maintain interest and build toward the moment when order forms appeared. And then, when the demonstration ended, you shifted roles smoothly from performer to friend. You circulated with coffee, chatted casually, answered questions without pressure. You let the products speak for themselves now that the show was over, trusted that the performance had done its work. Your living room stage was small. No spotlights, no orchestra, no curtain calls. But in its way, it was Broadway for Housewives. You performed weekly, refined your craft, learned what worked and what did not. You entertained, educated, persuaded, all while serving cookies and making it look effortless. And when your guests left, still chatting excitedly about what they had seen and bought, you knew the performance had succeeded. The living room returned to being just a living room, but for those few hours it had been something more. Every sale brought a small thrill. When a neighbour signed the order form, handed over payment, you felt a surge of pride. You did that. You convinced someone to buy, not through manipulation, but through connection and belief in your product. It validated your effort, your pitch, your worth. You carefully recorded the sale in your logbook, calculated your commission, and felt the satisfaction of money earned through your own skill. It was a quiet pride, not loud or showy, but deeply felt. You were building something, one sale at a time, and that mattered. The moment of commitment was always visible. You saw it in the customer's face, the shift from browsing to deciding, the small nod that signaled yes. You learned to recognize that moment, to honor it without rushing, to let the customer feel good about their decision. You handed them the order form and a pen, watched them fill in their name and address, write down their product choices, calculate their total. Your hand was steady as you accepted the form, but inside you felt that small electric thrill. Another sale, another commission, another validation that you could do this. You thanked them warmly, genuinely. Your gratitude was real because every sale mattered, especially the small ones. The woman who bought a single container, the smallest item in the catalogue, she mattered just as much as the woman who bought the complete storage set. Both were customers who trusted you, believed in your recommendation, chose to give you their business. After the party ended and guests left, you sat at your dining room table with your logbook open before you. You recorded each sale carefully, noting the customer name, items purchased, payment received. Your handwriting was neat, methodical. These records were your business, proof that this enterprise was real, legitimate, growing. Then came the best part, calculating commissions. You worked through the math carefully, multiplying sales by your commission rate, adding up the total. Each calculation represented money you had earned, not money your husband earned and shared with you. Money you earned through your own effort, your own skill. The total for tonight's party, $23.50 in sales. Your commission, $4.70. You wrote the number in your ledger, circled it. $4.70 did not sound like much. Your husband earned more than that in an hour. But this was different. This money carried weight beyond its monetary value. You allowed yourself a moment of satisfaction. You leaned back in your chair, looked at the numbers, and let the pride wash over you. You had hosted successfully. You had demonstrated effectively. You had connected with customers and closed sales. You had done business. The pride was quiet, private. You did not run to tell your husband about tonight's success. He would not understand why $4.70 mattered so much. He would nod politely, say, "That is nice," and return to his newspaper. He could not grasp that this was not about the amount. It was about capability, independence, achievement measured in your own metrics. You thought about the customers who bought tonight. Mrs. Jenkins, who ordered the storage set for her daughter heading to college. Mrs. Wallace, who bought lipstick in a shade you suggested, trusting your judgment. Mrs. Morrison, who purchased cleaning supplies after watching your demonstration. Each sale represented a relationship, a moment of connection, a problem solved. You felt proud not just of the money, but of the service you provided. You helped women organize their homes, feel beautiful, simplify their lives. The products were good, useful, worth owning. You were not swindling anyone. You were offering genuine value, making recommendations you believed in. The pride had layers. Pride in your sales ability, pride in your growing business skills, pride in managing inventory, bookkeeping, customer relationships, pride in proving to yourself more than anyone that you were capable of more than society expected from housewives. Each sale was evidence that you had skills beyond cooking and cleaning, evidence that you could persuade, negotiate, close deals, evidence that you were a businesswoman, even if the business happened in your living room and the transactions involved plastic bowls and lipstick. The ledger became a record of your capability. You could flip back through pages and see your progress. Early entries showed small sales, hesitant attempts. Recent entries showed growth, confidence, increasing success. The progression was visible in black and white, undeniable proof of improvement. You closed your logbook, tucked it carefully into your desk drawer. Tomorrow you would prepare orders, arrange delivery, follow up with customers. But tonight you allowed yourself this quiet moment of satisfaction. You had made sales. You had earned money. You had built something. And in 1954 America, when women were expected to be satisfied with domestic duties alone, that was revolutionary. Even if revolution looked like $4.70 in a ledger and a smile you wore just for yourself. The pride was not about the amount. It was about the earning. It was about proving to yourself that you had value beyond your roles as wife and mother. It was about economic agency, however modest. It was about the satisfaction of work completed well, of a skill developed and deployed successfully. Other women might not understand. Your mother might dismiss it as a hobby. Your husband might tolerate it but not truly value it. Society might minimize it as women's work, not real business. But you knew better. You knew that every sale represented effort, strategy, relationship building, performance, follow-through. You knew that running this business required skills that were real and valuable, even if they were not recognized as such. And so you honored your own achievement. You allowed yourself to feel proud. You permitted yourself satisfaction in work well done, because you had earned it, one sale at a time. The living room stores of the 1950s left a legacy that extended far beyond Tupperware and Avon. They proved that women could be entrepreneurs, that commerce could happen anywhere, that community and business were not opposites. They paved the way for future generations of women who would start businesses from home, who would refuse to choose between motherhood and ambition. The living room store was never just about products. It was about possibility, agency, and the quiet revolution of women who turn their homes into something more. And though the parties have faded, the spirit remains, that you can build something meaningful right where you are, with what you have, and that sometimes the most powerful businesses start not in boardrooms, but in living rooms. The impact was not immediately obvious. At the time, these businesses were often dismissed as hobbies, as small ventures that did not really count as entrepreneurship. They were women's work, domestic commerce, not serious business. But looking back, the significance becomes clear. Millions of women ran businesses from their homes decades before technology made remote work commonplace. They built networks, managed inventory, developed sales skills, learned bookkeeping and customer service and marketing. They did this without business degrees, without startup capital, without anyone telling them they could. They did it because they needed income and opportunity and purpose beyond housework. And in doing it, they changed what was possible for women who came after. The skills women learned in living room stores transferred to other contexts. The housewife who learned to pitch Tupperware learned persuasion, presentation, confidence. The woman who managed Avon inventory learned organisation, record-keeping, planning. These were business skills, real and valuable, even if society did not recognise them as such at the time. Some women leveraged their home business experience into traditional careers. They took sales jobs, management positions, started other businesses. They walked into interviews with experience running their own enterprises, managing customers, meeting quotas. The living room store became a resume line, proof of capability and initiative. The model also demonstrated that business and community could coexist, even strengthen each other. The parties were commercial events, yes, but they were also social gatherings, opportunities for women to connect, support each other, share their lives. The living room store showed that making money and making friends were not mutually exclusive, that enterprise could be embedded in relationship rather than opposed to it. The companies that pioneered this model, Tupperware, Avon, Stanley, Fuller, they understood something that corporate America was slow to recognize, that women had economic power, sales ability, entrepreneurial drive. These companies built billion-dollar businesses by trusting women to sell, by giving them tools and training and opportunity. They proved that women were not just consumers, but capable business people. The legacy is visible in modern direct sales, in multi-level marketing, in home-based businesses enabled by internet technology. The structures changed, the products evolved, but the fundamental model remained. Individuals, often women, building businesses from home, leveraging personal networks, creating income on their own terms. The legacy is also visible in cultural memory. The Tupperware party became iconic, a symbol of 1950s domesticity, but also of female entrepreneurship. The Avon lady became a fixture in American consciousness, representing door-to-door sales, but also women's economic participation. These images endured because they represented something significant, a moment when women claimed economic space in a society that tried to confine them to kitchens. The living room store era had problems, certainly. The pressure, the blurred boundaries between friendship and commerce, the exploitation inherent in some multi-level structures. Not every woman succeeded. Not every business was ethical. The model had flaws that became more apparent over time. But the fundamental legacy remained powerful. Women proved they could build businesses anywhere, that entrepreneurship did not require offices or degrees or permission. They proved they could earn money, manage enterprises, succeed commercially while still fulfilling traditional domestic roles. They expanded what was possible for women, opened doors that had been closed, created opportunities where none existed before. The living room store taught daughters that their mothers were more than mothers. It showed children that women could work, earn, succeed. It planted seeds that would grow into the women's liberation movement, into demands for equal pay and equal opportunity, into the gradual dismantling of barriers that kept women economically dependent. The women who hosted Tupperware parties and sold Avon did not think of themselves as revolutionaries. They thought of themselves as housewives trying to earn extra money. But collectively, they were revolutionary. They were claiming economic agency in a world that denied it to them. They were building businesses in spaces designated for domestic labour only. They were proving their capability despite a society that constantly underestimated them. And they did it in living rooms, in homes, in spaces that society said were not for business, were not for ambition, were not for anything beyond domestic duty. They did it anyway. The legacy lives on in every woman who starts a business from home, in every mother who balances entrepreneurship with parenting, in every person who understands that meaningful work can happen anywhere, not just in corporate offices or traditional workplaces. The legacy lives on in the understanding that business built on relationships is not inferior to business built on transactions. That community and commerce can coexist. That small-scale entrepreneurship matters just as much as corporate success. And in doing so, they changed not just their own lives, but the landscape of possibility for every woman who came after, every daughter who watched her mother sell, every granddaughter who started a business from home and did not think twice about whether it was possible, because her grandmother had already proven it was. One sale, one party, one living room at a time. The living room store was never just about Tupperware or Avon or Stanley products. It was about women refusing to accept that domestic space was their only space. It was about claiming economic power in whatever form was available. It was about building something, however modest, that was theirs. And that legacy, quiet and often overlooked, changed everything. So tonight, as you settle deeper into your blankets, let's take a breath and look back at the world we just walked through together. You spent a day in the shoes of a 1950s housewife who turned her living room into a store, who balanced motherhood and business with nothing but determination and a sample case. You saw her arrange Tupperware on the coffee table, brew coffee for neighbours who were also customers, and navigate the delicate line between friendship and commerce. You watched her calculate commissions at the kitchen table, manage inventory and hall closets, and build something meaningful in a world that told her she should be satisfied with less. These women were not famous. They did not make headlines or change laws, but they changed what was possible, quietly, persistently, one sale at a time. They proved that ambition could live in a living room, that entrepreneurship did not require permission, and that women could build businesses right where they stood. They did it with grace, with strategy, with the kind of quiet courage that history often overlooks. So as you drift towards sleep tonight, maybe carry something small from this era forward. Maybe it is the reminder that meaningful work can happen anywhere. Maybe it is the knowledge that community and commerce can coexist. Maybe it is simply the image of a woman sitting at her dining room table, recording a sale in her logbook, feeling proud of something she built herself. History is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is just a doorbell ringing, a product demonstration, and a neighbour who trusted you enough to buy. Sometimes it is coffee and cookies, and the quiet satisfaction of earning money on your own terms. And that is enough. That has always been enough. Rest well tonight, knowing that ordinary people doing ordinary things have always been the ones who quietly change the world. Good night.